Hi, it's me, P, and this video is going to be about med student anecdotes, or basically just funny moments from my med school and residency experience. Um, and these are going to be out of order. These are just things that will pop into my head and I'll just recount them. Some of them are more funny than others, and some are more morbid than others, okay? Um, I haven't written any of this down, so this is just purely from memory. I'll be pausing this video a lot. The first thing I wanted to tell you guys was how one of my friends in med school during our surgery placement um, uh, just started feeling woozy, and she actually fell into the patient and like lost a tooth because they always tell you, like, if you feel woozy, fall backwards, don't fall forwards. Because what happens is that if you fall forwards, not only you are going to get a head full of like gore, um, also you will contaminate the patient. So you are potentially killing a patient by doing that. So she showed up in class a few days later with her two front teeth missing, and that was must be one of the most interesting ways to get your tooth chipped. But yeah, so that has happened. Another thing that has happened is another time in surgery. Um, we had a patient, like a abdominal surgery, which is really big surgery. Especially liver transplant and that kind of thing is super long time to do a surgery, because first you have to open it up and then you have to deal with all of the like intestines and stuff in the way, and you have to like put it out and stuff. And they did this procedure that um, basically is like chemo but inside the stomach. So they put this liquid in there that like rinses the stomach area from tumors, like micro tumors. It's like just rinsing it with this radioactive stuff. I don't know what it is. It's not radioactive, but it's dangerous to inhale, and it affects fertility in females. So um, I was actually glad that they told me, "Oh, you're a fertile female. You can leave." Um, I'm glad I left because that surgery went on for 4 more hours. I'd already been in there for 5 hours. Okay. I was like hungry for lunch, and my male medical school friend, he stayed there the whole time. And yeah, I just thought that was kind of a funny story. Like, that's the only time I'm happy to be discriminated against for my gender, is in that instance. Let's see, what else do I have? I also have met this woman at the orthopedic clinic when I was doing my internship, and I think it's okay for me to say her name because it was kind of a funny name. It doesn't matter. Um, but she had like a kind of an unusual name, and that's why I remember her. But she was from the countryside, and like she'd never been like at the doctor before. It's like the hospital was a really scary thing for her. Um, and I went to the emergency room, and like she'd hurt her back, but it wasn't. It was basically just a lumbar muscle that had um, been hurt. It wasn't. She hadn't broken um, any of her vertebra, or like nothing serious. But of course, back pain can be a killer. Basically, it's It's really terrible when your back aches because like you can't stand up, you can't sit down, you can't lie down. And she was so scared. So I actually talked to her a bit, and she was so happy that anybody was able to talk to her. She was like, "Oh, thank you for your time and everything." But then she was like, "I have a son. Would you like to? Um, you could get in touch with my son. He's really sweet and good looking." And I was like, I was so taken aback that I was like, "No, actually, I like girls." And she was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Thanks for telling me, you know." Um, and then she said, "I have a daughter too." And I was like, "Yeah, no, thanks." But what happened is that um, I hadn't come out to anybody at my work, so that was kind of funny. That I ended up by accident coming out to this patient. Um, Fast forward a year later, and she's a patient at the GP clinic where I am. She's like, "Oh, it's you! Oh!" And so she was really happy to be my patient, but I honestly did not have time for her uh, discussions. She was there for a completely different reason. Um, but yeah, don't think that you'll never see your patients again because they'll pop up in unlikely places. Um, I mean, it wasn't that unlikely, but I didn't know that I'd meet her like 1.5 years later, um, and that she'd still remember um, my sexual orientation. Okay. So that was pretty funny. Another thing that has happened is when you see psychiatric patients around town. Um, I mean, it's sad for them. It's not really funny, but certain things are kind of funny because you realize like, wow, nobody else knows this stuff about my patients except for me. And there is this patient who was like psychotic and bipolar, and she was going to have a child, and she was going to have a child with a 70-year-old man. Okay, this person was maybe around 35, and she was going to have a child with a 70-year-old man, and this man was probably abusive. And so, well, he'd been reported and stuff, but what ended up happening is that, like, right when I was about to discharge her, I didn't know anything about this person. Uh, she started asking me, like, where do I abort my kid? And I was like, I mean, I can refer you to the clinic, but she she had a tough time. She had borderline also, and she had a tough time. Like she couldn't make up her mind, like if she wanted to abort this baby or not. And she ended up carrying this baby to term and stuff, but she had to be placed in a home because she couldn't really take care of her child, um, which I'm kind of grateful for because everything. But I kept seeing her at McDonald's. She kept coming to the no, it wasn't McDonald's. It was Burger King. It was a Burger King in town, and she kept going there, and she was going there in a bathrobe. Um, like she was kind of, well, I think that she'd been a prostitute and stuff. Um, so she was kind of dressed in like really tacky clothes, and she would keep going to Burger King, and I was actually relieved because I kept seeing her, and I would see her stomach getting bigger and bigger, and I was actually and I saw her before and after her giving birth, and it's just interesting to like see into the lives of people. Um, what I thought was funny is that like I would see her every time at the Burger King, and it's not even such a funny story. It's just interesting to see how some people live their lives. Um, let's see if I have any other interesting facts. I need to pause. Oh, another story was when a guy started, like, one of my patients started flirting with me while I was in medical school. And the reason he was there um, was pals. So obviously, like, I'm not seeing the best of him, you know? Um, he was like, "What do you do on the weekend?" And I was like, "How is that any of your business?" Um, and he was talking to me about diarrhea, so that wasn't very sexy. Um, and I pointed that out to him. And then he left. So yeah, that was also kind of a funny story. Well, another funny story was that I actually had Olympic rower in like in my class, and he was in my group. So I actually he was always the one to show like anatomy. um, like if we were to like palpate an abdominal like stuff and also to feel shoulder muscles and stuff, he was like the perfect anatomy model. I ended up meeting him just a few weeks ago because he works in my region as an intern, and I've actually met his grandparents at the clinic. They were like, "Oh, do you know this guy who's called this? He just finished medical school. He went down a few semesters at medical school, so he graduated later because he was doing all of his Olympic rowing stuff." I said yes, and so they're like, "Oh," so I basically met his entire family, and they're so proud of him, and it's kind of funny to have these encounters. And then I realized, oh, okay, I see why he grew up in this area that has a lot of water, so that's how he got into rowing. Um, so yeah. Also, I know what his um, whole body looks like. Okay, they went to say that to his family. I don't know if I've told you guys about the person that we had to fetch a dildo out of. But that was also pretty amazing. The sort of things that people stuff up their butts is um, sometimes a little bit scary. And I stayed at work 2 hours more just to see this operation. Not because I'm interested or anything, but it was pretty impressive to see like how they got this thing out of him. Unfortunately, he wasn't prioritized because there were other people with more pressing diseases. So he stayed with that dildo in his intestines, like in his bowels, for 12 hours. Oh, I also met a patient once who had stomach problems. And I was like, oh, well, what you eat, what you drink, do you drink alcohol, that kind of thing. And I couldn't figure out what was the problem. Because, like, she was eating fine, she was drinking enough water and stuff, or liquids. And it ends up that she drank 3 liters of Coca-Cola a day. And I was like, yeah, I think that you might need to look at that. And she had no idea that drinking 3 liters of Coca-Cola a day is too much. Um, but yeah, so sometimes you need to ask your patients really weird questions. Um, I also had a patient once that's because of um, language problems, like we didn't speak the same language. I thought that he drank a lot of alcohol a day, and it ends up that he was drinking lemon juice because he thought that lemon juice was good against COVID. So he was drinking tons of lemon juice, and that was also destroying his stomach. So yeah, some people have pretty weird ideas. I also had a patient once who was a really old lady living in the south of Sweden, which is where I did my internship. And they make mustard down in the south of Sweden. So um, I was wondering, like, if she had a stroke. And she said, no, if I had a stroke, she would know because, like, every day she would crush these mustard seeds into this, like, with a pestle and stuff. And she said that she's been making mustard since she was 20 years old, and she was now like 79. Um, so it's great to meet those kinds of people. But so yeah, she hadn't had a stroke, so I'm relieved. Um, I also met this other guy who I actually met in 3 different departments. First, I met him at the emergency room. Then I met him at medicine. Then, unfortunately, he was placed in a room with somebody with COVID. So then I met him. No, I met him in many different departments. I met him in the infection clinic because he had COVID. Then I saw him in the neurology department because um, the reason why he was at the medical department was actually because of his nerves. And then it ends up, I met him at the psychiatry department because all of this shaking that he was experiencing was psychosomatic. Um, and I met him in all of those departments, and he kept forgetting who I was every time, which was pretty amazing. I mean, I kept saying, oh, remember me? Uh, so I do think that he did have some memory problems and that his trip to the neurology department was not completely stupid. Um, but yeah, he ended up. It was actually all psychosomatic. He ended up becoming better. I heard. So yeah, that can happen. Um, I'll finish it off with a morbid one, which is I actually met a patient at the emergency room who ended up dying the day later. He had necrotizing fasciitis. I don't know how it's said in English, but basically it's a like super resistant, terrible, quick skin infection that like destroys all its organs in this way. Um, Super bacteria. Um, Terrible, terrible way to die. Um, but I ended up like checking his death. Like I had to confirm his death. And I realized, wow, this guy looks better dead than alive. And I'm glad that's, well, he wasn't so much pain. It's honestly, I think that he felt it was a relief to die. Like you could see, it's like his features were so much more relaxed while he was dead. And uh, yeah, I remember thinking like, wow, Ingrid, that's insensitive. But then I realized, well, no. Um, Sometimes it's like that. Um, I'll also end with another morbid note, okay? I have a lot of morbid notes, but I promise this is the last one. I met a patient in the south of Sweden here um, who also ended up dying. Kind of my fault, but also kind of not. And the reason why is because he was speaking Danish. He was a Danish speaker, and we were quite near the border to Denmark. And Swedes don't understand Danes. Danes understand Swedes in general because Swedes articulate and Danish people just don't. Um, Danish language is really hard to understand for a Swedish person because it feels like they're just drunk. Okay, I'll say it. It feels like they're drunk when they talk. Because it's like garbled. Um, and I had no way of knowing how this person spoke beforehand. And he came in because of stroke. And one of the big things about stroke is um, if you can speak clearly and you're not like garbling your speech. So I had no idea if this is the way the guy talked normally or if this was because of a stroke. I had zero idea. Like, and so I called the, because of COVID, we couldn't have visitors. So I called his wife, but his wife was also Danish. So I was like, I was saying, like, does he usually speak like this? And she was like, blah, blah, blah. And I had no idea what she was saying. So it ends up this guy did not have a stroke. What happened was that we call my supervising doctor um, found out that he had cramped in the X-ray machine, and it ends up that it was his pacemaker that was making him shake, and so he couldn't think because of the pacemaker, which was really weird reason to have shakings and not feel well, you know. But we'll never really know if he also had a stroke. Um, he died. He died the day later. So yeah, that was pretty traumatizing. But it was also pretty funny because it shows that language can make a difference. Okay, Danes and Swedes. I mean, we think that we can understand each other's language, but I think that we maybe need an interpreter actually. Um, so yeah, that's my last anecdote. This video is getting long. I probably have tons of more anecdotes, but um, I hope that these made you laugh, if not like cry. Okay. Um, I have plenty more. It's just these are maybe the ones that are most that come to my mind right now. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.